Mr Acting Speaker, I rise to speak this afternoon to use this private member statement to the chamber to highlight one of the most significant challenges facing the region that I represent in this place. Western Sydney is home to 2 million people and rapidly growing. Over the next 20 years, it's expected to grow by another million, contributing to more than half of Sydney's overall expected population growth during this period. And on top of this, it's the nation's third largest economy. Yet governments have failed to fund the infrastructure needed to relieve the incredible pressure placed on communities in our city's rapidly growing outskirts. Of course, this isn't news to us that live there, as we sit in gridlock, on crowded trains and wait for hours in emergency departments. Mr Acting Speaker, the decade-long move towards urban sprawl in Sydney has created an infrastructure crisis in our suburbs. As government after government release more and more land for new housing stock, we have created unacceptably isolated communities, made worse by the unaffordability of living closer to the Sydney CBD. This is having incredible and terrible impacts. These impacts cannot be underestimated. It's just that we're sitting in traffic for inordinate amounts of our day, as frustrating as that is. In short, it has resulted in two Sydneys. One Sydney that is close to the CBD, to employment and connected by integrated public transport systems. And one Sydney where less than 3 in 10 people have access to a local job, where the rate of diabetes is 5 times higher than on the North Shore, where youth unemployment is twice the regional number. Of course, these can't all be attributed to the infrastructure disparity, but it most definitely creates a structural disadvantage, and that cannot be denied. As recently as last night, I heard a story about a young woman who catches 3 buses to get from home in Ropes Crossing to work in Richmond for a total travel time of 1.5 hours. So if we want people who live in Western Sydney to work in Western Sydney, they need to actually be able to get there. I recently attended the launch of the Fund Our Future campaign held in Penrith, being led by the National Growth Areas Alliance. The Fund Our Future campaign is calling on the federal government to commit to a dedicated infrastructure fund to address this backlog, and to be using this upcoming election year to call on the government and the opposition to sign up to their cause. And I'm pleased to know that the opposition leader in this place, Luke Foley, has recently signed a letter of support to this campaign. On behalf of the community I represent in this place, I'll watch this campaign with ongoing interest. But the New South Wales government has a responsibility to rise to this challenge and also think of ways to confront this dilemma, which only gets worse with time. In New South Wales, the government argues it's fixing the problem with more roads. It's the field of dreams, Acting Speaker. Build it and they'll come. It's Sydney. The road will be clogged again in 12 months and then we're back at square one. Everyone knows the answer to this is better public transport. Instead of doing what the government does and flog off our publicly owned assets, I believe we need to look at other ways, more creative ways, to fund the backlog. There's no magic pudding. We need new funding models. We need to look seriously at using our publicly owned rail assets productively, using the land around them and the airspace over them to get the best outcome for the community. And this might even include developments along rail corridors to fund desperately needed infrastructure. It's just not good enough for a city like Sydney to be so divided. If we are truly going to be a global city, then we need to get real about connecting all our communities to services and stop the breakneck outward expansion without the infrastructure that communities like mine deserve. Without having the courage to really look at this creatively, these divisions will only deepen on our watch. Thank you.
Speaker. The Parliamentary Secretary in reply.
Mr Acting Speaker, I take the opportunity to remind the member for Londonderry that never has an area been more deprived of essential services such as roads and public transport as Western Sydney under the reign, the 16-year reign of the previous Labor government, her party and the former Labor government. And no area suffered more than my particular electorate around the Rouse Hill area. It was expected to absorb 250,000 to 300,000 people, and we had broken broken promise after broken promise of a promise to build the North West Rail Link, never ever eventuated. And as the Premier said today, Mr Acting Speaker, very, very proud to announce that all that tunnelling on that 31-kilometre rail line is now complete. That rail line will be completed by 2019, and the member should also be reminded of the fact that her own leader opposed the inner city light rail. So they are on the record as opposing public transport.
We're talking about Western Sydney Road.
The